The Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democrats actually collude with the Russians. Of this, there is no doubt. John Kerry is colluding with the Iranians. Of this, there is no doubt. He's confessed. The Obama administration uses the instrumentalities of law enforcement and the intelligence agencies to interfere in the last election. Of this, there is no question. The Obama administration washes funds through the State Department to interfere in the election in Israel to try and topple Netanyahu. Of this, there's no question. And there's no special counsel. None. None. Each and every one of these, in and of themselves, a colossal scandal. Nothing. We have this story in the Washington Free Beacon, an excellent site. And in this story, they cite an interview by my friend Hugh Hewitt, who actually secured John Kerry as a guest. And it's a great piece by a great reporter, Adam Credo. Former Secretary of State John Kerry disclosed that he's been conducting rogue diplomacy with top Iranian officials to salvage the landmark nuclear deal and push the Islamic Republic to negotiate its contested missile program, according to recent remarks. Now, this is shocking. After the hurricane news, which is worthy news, substantive news, important information to convey to the American people, and particularly those in these areas, this should be story number 2 today. This. Kerry, in an interview with radio host Hugh Hewitt to promote his new book, said that he has met with Iranian former minister Javad Zarif, the former secretary's one-time negotiating partner, 3 or 4 times in recent months, behind the Trump administration's back. I think I've seen him 3 or 4 times, Kerry said, adding that he has been conducting sensitive diplomacy without the current administration's authorization. Kerry said he has criticized the current administration in these discussions, chiding it for not pursuing negotiations from Iran despite the country's fevered rhetoric about the U.S. Kerry's comments are in line with previous reporting on his behind-the-scenes attempts to save the nuclear deal and ensure that Iran continues receiving billions in cash windfalls. These payments were brought to a halt by the Trump administration when it abandoned the nuclear agreement and reimposed harsh sanctions on Iran that have nearly toppled its economy and sparked a popular revolution. John Kerry is Benedict Arnold. That's what he is. He's Benedict Arnold. He did it during the Vietnam War, and he's doing it again. Kerry said he met Zarif in Norway, Munich, and other international forums. As Iran continues to plot terror attacks across the globe and transport weapons to regional hotspots in Syria and Yemen, Kerry has tried to help Zarif preserve the nuclear agreement with European nations. So we have a rogue shadow government here, ladies and gentlemen. A rogue shadow government. Just as Kerry's former colleague from Massachusetts, Ted Kennedy, worked closely with the Soviet regime against Ronald Reagan. Kerry is working closely with the Iranian regime against President Trump and the United States of America. What I've done is try to elicit from him, Zarif, what Iran might be willing to do to change the dynamic of the Middle East for the better, Kerry said. Now, he's a private citizen. How does one resolve Yemen? What do you do to try and get peace in Syria? Those are the things that really are preoccupying him, because those are the impediments to Iran's ability to convince people it's ready to embrace something different. Kerry said he has offered blunt talk to Zarif in order to push the regime to accept restrictions on its foreign interventionism. I've been very blunt to Foreign Minister Zarif. I told him, look, you guys need to recognize the world does not appreciate what's happening with missiles, what's happening with Hezbollah, what's happening with Yemen. You're supporting an ongoing struggle there. What an idiot. Like they don't know that? They're terrorists. What an idiot. Iran has said they're prepared to negotiate and resolve these issues, but the Trump administration's taken a very different tack, says Kerry. Criticizing the current White House, Kerry lamented that it appears right now as if the administration is hell-bent to pursue a regime change strategy in Iran that would bring the economy down and try to isolate it further. Never known for being the brightest bulb in the chandelier. The former Secretary of State cautioned the current administration, saying the United States historically has not had a great record in regime change strategies, number one. Number two, that makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for any Iranian leader to sit down and negotiate anything, because they're not going to do it in a capitulatory situation. Iranian leaders have said multiple times in recent months they will not take any meetings with Trump or his administration. So here is John Kerry giving testimony against himself. Sally Yates, the former Deputy Attorney General of the United States, was waving around the Logan Act, which has never been used successfully and rarely been used since its earliest times, against private citizens who interfere in diplomacy and American foreign policy. Yet they waved it around when it came to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. It was a pretext that the United States Department of Justice under Barack Obama used to try and set up General Flynn. In fact, Sally Yates raised it with the FBI director. Sally Yates raised it a lot, the Logan Act, knowing it had never been successfully used and had rarely been used since it was instituted. And yet when it comes to John Kerry, nobody mentions it in the media. When it comes to collusion with an enemy, and undermining a sitting administration, John Kerry has done exactly that. He's give aid and comfort to the enemy. And I have to wonder, will there be a FISA warrant issued to surveil him now? To see what other activities he's been involved in, to see the extent to which he will continue his rogue diplomacy with the Iranian regime as he undermines our commander-in-chief. Would a FISA court judge, quick to issue a warrant against Carter Page and Trump World, will they be quick to issue a warrant to surveil John Kerry, who should be surveilled now? Don't you think? I mean, there's certainly enough information to justify it, including his own unwitting confession. Nobody ever said he's the brightest person in the world. In fact, he's one of the dumbest. Then John Kerry, hawking a book, is on with Dana Perino on Fox. Let's hear how that went. Cut 12, go.
How many times since you left office have you met with the Iranians or Iranian representatives?
A few times, 2 or 3 times.
And is that
now let's stop there. 2 or 3 times. Did he not tell Hugh Hewitt 3 or 4 times, Mr. Producer? Wouldn't you know how many times you've met with a surrogate for the Iranian terrorist regime? That's just a simple point. Go ahead.
About the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, it's to talk to them. No, it's to talk to them more importantly about their behavior and what are the ways forward in order to try to redefine a security arrangement for the region that works for everybody.
Yeah, but you're not an official of the United States government. The officials in the United States government have taken a position. It's not your position. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this is why Barack Obama is hell-bent on seeing Donald Trump impeached and bogged down in investigations and subpoenas by his own party. What the Obama administration did in the lead-up to the election and during the election to try and sabotage the Trump candidacy, and what its surrogates are doing now, absolutely unprecedented. Unprecedented, as far as I know, in American history. Let's go back to Benedict Arnold, John Kerry. Go ahead.
Iran is going to continue to meddle in Yemen or to meddle in other countries, Saudi Arabia, elsewhere,
Hezbollah.
or fund Hezbollah, or mess around with Syria, or be involved in Iraq. We have legitimate concerns. What people don't realize is, even in the agreement that we made with Iran with respect to their nuclear weapon, we kept the sanctions on missiles. We kept the sanctions on human rights abuses. We kept the sanctions on their transfer of weapons to Yemen. And we raised those sanctions several times. So we object as much as anybody to those activities, but we differ.
The sanctions were phony. The sanctions were not instituted. And the entire deal was bogus. The entire deal was bogus. So they could continue to be poised to effect a nuclear arsenal. But don't worry, we placed some sanctions in place. The problem is whether the Trump administration says so or not straightforwardly, the regime needs to be toppled. The regime needs to be toppled. I know this really upsets the Code Pink Republicans, including one of whom is on Fox and several of whom have columns and websites and so forth. But this regime needs to be toppled. It is a terrorist regime. It has killed American soldiers. It is developing nuclear weapons. It will continue to develop nuclear weapons and ICBMs. The world doesn't end in 5 years or 10 years. This is a regime that will continue to pursue them. Nuclear proliferation. And so the goal is to address that before they have missiles that can hit Chicago and Philadelphia and New York and Washington and Los Angeles and Houston and Dallas and Seattle, and Portland, and Detroit, and Miami, and every major metropolitan area in this country and everything in between and around. That's the point. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Do any of the CNN and MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, CBS, ABC, NBC, and their ilk, do any of the so-called reporters for any of these entities believe that John Kerry should be investigated for colluding with the Iranians? Do they? Investigated by committees of Congress, foreign affairs and intelligence committees? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump Jr. has been brutally attacked for having a meeting with some Russians, of which nothing came of it. Here we have a former Secretary of State under the former President of the United States actually negotiating with the former Foreign Minister of an enemy state, negotiating behind the back of the existing administration. Now, what's worse when it comes to the United States? What's worse when it comes to basic ethics? John Kerry conducting a rogue foreign policy, interfering with the decisions of the current administration, or Don Jr. having a meeting with some Russians of which nothing came from the meeting. He was going to perhaps get some information, which they didn't have. And we have heard all along, on and on and on, Don Jr., this, Don Jr. that. Poor Don Jr., I'll tell you what, there he is, colluding with the Russians. There it is, he's colluding. He ought to be indicted. Indicted for what? Meanwhile, there's John Kerry, big, dumb John Kerry, who already sold out the country with the Iran deal. Circling back. I think I had 2 or 3 meetings. Well, you told Hugh Hewitt it was 3 or 4. Yeah, who can count? Who can count? Well, was it 2 meetings, 3 meetings for... There, Mr. Mueller, you can investigate him. Get him for perjury and false statements. These people are never investigated. They never have criminal statutes overhanging them. Ever. So here we have a meeting. 1, 2, 3, at least 4, who the hell knows how many, between John Kerry and a surrogate for the Iranian Islamo-Nazi regime. A sworn enemy of the United States that wants to build nuclear warheads that can hit our cities. Not some Iranian lawyer. And nothing. Zippo. It's absolutely incredible. It's like Joe Biden's son. And I think it's John Kerry's stepson, Heinz, doing all kinds of business with the communist government of China. Nobody cares. Nobody blinks an eye. Oh, Joe Biden, he should be the next nominee for the Democrat Party for President of the United States. The only guy dumber than Kerry is Joe Biden. It's a room full of stupid. Oh, that's okay. No problem. At least it's not the Russians. And I take a back seat to nobody on Vladimir Putin and the Russians and the threat they pose for this country. And they do. Which is what makes this so crazy. Logan Act. Oh, the Logan Act. The Logan Act. No big deal. Mike Flynn, yeah, get him with the Logan Act. Don Jr. has turns out to be a pointless meeting with a few Russians. Look at that. He had meetings with Russians. Oh, yeah, look at that. Meetings with Russians. As if he agreed to give 20% of our uranium, control over our uranium to Putin. Oh, no, that's Hillary. Oh, forget it. Shh, hush, hush. So John Kerry undermining the current Secretary of State. John Kerry undermining the President of the United States. Directly, repeatedly, negotiating with the Iranians. Caught red-handed, so to speak. Stupidly confessing. Anybody care? I'll be right back.
This is Radio Free America on the Mark Levin Show. Call now, 877-381-3811.
President of the United States issued an executive order today, and along with it a statement. I don't know if you've heard this today. Probably not. He said, today I took action to protect the integrity of the United States electoral system by signing an executive order to ensure that we can swiftly identify and punish any foreign interference in our elections. So I've made clear the United States will not tolerate any form of foreign meddling in our elections. This executive order requires the intelligence community and other federal agencies to assess the extent of any foreign interference after every United States election. The United States determines that any foreign meddling has occurred. The executive order ensures a quick, forceful, and proportionate response. Specifically, the executive order authorizes appropriate and meaningful sanctions. Some are full blocking sanctions. Others are to be designed and calibrated in light of specific facts against any individual, foreign entity, or country that authorizes, directs, sponsors, or otherwise supports foreign interference in a United States election. The executive order also directs the executive branch to develop a uniform process for assessing and determining foreign interference in United States elections. In the United States, primary responsibility for managing elections resides with the state, territory, and local authorities. The federal government, however, plays an essential role in identifying and deterring foreign interference and supporting state and local officials to secure election infrastructure. When it comes to foreign policy, my administration has delivered decisively and taken action where previous administrations have not. By signing this executive order, I'm adding to my record of implementing the strongest measures to date of any United States president to protect our electoral system. And as we enter election season this fall, the American people can rest assured that we are working diligently to ensure that our democracy remains secure from foreign threats. Does that sound like somebody who would collude with any government against his own government? Against his own people? Is this not so absurd, these allegations? And how they started, and then they were perpetuated by the media. Donald Trump is like a super patriot. He's mocked for it. And the notion that he would do a John Kerry or a Ted Kennedy and collude with a foreign government is just absurd on its face. And here he is, making it clear to any individual, group, or government that once we have an election and we find out you interfered with it in any way, you will feel our wrath. Now, I didn't hear Andrea Mitchell talking about this today. Now, I must confess, it's not like I hang on her every report. I don't hang on any of her reports. But if Barack Obama had done this, Barack Obama did the opposite. He kept quiet from the American people the fact of Russian interference until just a few days before the election, a week or so, when it looked like Hillary was in trouble. He kept it secret. They were given stand-down orders. Don't really engage the Russians. We've never really gotten to the bottom of what, if anything, the Obama administration did to confront Russian interference in our election. It's amazing. You would have thought Donald Trump was president of the United States, the way they try and wrap it around his throat. It's unbelievable. It wasn't his administration. It was the Obama administration. It wasn't his CIA director, his FBI director, his attorney general, his secretary of state. It was theirs. And they did butkus. Purposely. Because they didn't want to taint Hillary's predicted victory, you see.